Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome everybody to Monday's class, the beginning of week 5. Jazakumullah for arriving early and being here for the start of our lesson properly. Today, class 21, we will be following our usual format of our opening dua, and then our rule in focus is assimilation, also known as idgham in Arabic. And today we are going to be looking at one of those rules, which involves ra and lam after noon sakin. For our practice text, we will be using chapter 96, and inshallah we'll get to verse 10 today. 3 letters of the day today, and then we will finish in our usual way with our concluding dua and setting the homework. Okay, so if I may have a student to the mic, please.
Assalamualaikum everyone. G2 116, please unmute yourself.
G2 116.
Assalamualaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, darling. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, I am very well. Jazakumullah for asking, darling. Okay, sweetheart. So it's Monday, and our dua for today is this. That's I've highlighted in yellow. Repeat with me, darling. Everybody at home also follow, please. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
Okay, darling. رب اشرح لي
رب اشرح لي
صدري
صدري
ويسر لي
ويسر لي
أمري.
أمري.
And then the English translation underneath, darling.
Lord, expand my mind and make my task easy for me. Chapter Daha, verse 26 to 27.
Mashallah. So very, very nicely done. Very professional. Jazakumullah sweetheart. Allah Hafiz for now, and inshallah we'll have you back on the mic at some point. Okay, so let's now move on to our rule. And if I can just share my screen. Okay, so today's rules are the rules of Noon, Sakin and Tanween. We've already introduced one of these rules, and you'll probably be able to recognize it as we go along. Okay, rules of Noon, Sakin and Tanween. They enable you to recognize the nasal sound that you make when you see a Noon, Sakin or a Tanween, according to the rules. Now, before we get going, I want to just remind ourselves of some basics. It's always good to do revision, and sometimes we've missed a class, and we've also got new students in the class as well. So I just want everyone to be reminded of some basics. And we'll use these letters here as our tools. So, Fatha. A fatha is a slanted stroke, and it looks like that black slanted stroke there above the black alif. Kasra. It's a slanted stroke, and it's sitting underneath this black alif here. That's what it looks like. Dhamma. That's what the stroke looks like above the black alif. Now, collectively, these are known as short strokes. And when we read them, we take 1 second on any letter that carries those strokes. So let's look at the red alifs and the strokes that are on those. Fathatain. Fathatain is fatha 2 times. Fatha written twice. And above the red alif are 2 red fatha. Those strokes are known as fathatain. In the same way, kasratain is kasra written 2 times. And it's there underneath this red alif a kasra written twice, kasratain. Dhammatain, it's two dhamma written above a letter, and that's what they look like, above the red alif there. Now, collectively, these strokes are known as tanween. If someone was to say tanween stroke, they could be talking about dhammatain, kasratain, or fathatain. And I could just as easily say this letter with the kasratain or this tanween letter means the same thing. Now, tanween has a default nasal sound, a 2-second nasal sound. And for the example of kasratain, it would be in. Now, that's the default sound that you would make. But depending on the letter that's coming up, that sound changes. And today's rules are all about how that sound changes, both for tanween and for Noon Sarkin. Okay. Let's now look at some other basics using these two words here. A vowel letter. A vowel letter is a letter carrying a stroke. So this ayn with the fatha, that's a vowel letter. Now, just want to remind you that the word vowel is an English word. If I was to use the Arabic term, I'd be saying muttaharik. Teachers will often interchange between vowel letter and muttaharik letter. It's a very common thing. Don't ever be confused. They mean the same thing. Vowel letter is the English way of saying it. Muttaharik letter is the Arabic. Okay, a Sarkin letter. A Sarkin letter is a letter carrying a sukoon. And here we have a ra with a sukoon sitting on top. That is a Sarkin ra. So a Noon Sarkin would be a Noon carrying a sukoon. And we have one here and one here. Okay. Rules of Noon Sarkin. When you see a Noon Sarkin or tanween, a nasal sound is observed. Anytime you see a Noon Sarkin or a tanween, you'll know that there'll be some sort of nasal sound. There are rules that will tell you what that nasal sound is. The next letter after Noon Sarkin or tanween decides the nasal sound. So you must always look at the next letter. Okay, so these are things that you actually already know. We just were going through them to remind ourselves and refresh our memory. Let's move on. The rule in focus today is assimilation. Now, assimilation is the English word. In Arabic, it's known as idgham. A simpler word for assimilation is merging. Assimilation rules tell us how to merge sounds of certain letters after Noon Sarkin or tanween. Now, these letters here, they were given to you as a homework on Friday for you to memorize. These letters are the letters of assimilation. These letters have an effect on the nasal sound that you will make. If you are going to memorize them, the easy way to remember them is the word that they spell if you take their sounds. Yarmala'un. Yurmalun. If you see any of these letters after Noon Sarkin or tanween, there will be some sort of nasal sound. Okay, so there's 6 letters there, okay, but today we're going to look at the letter Ra and the letter Lam. So let's just get our screen a little bit tidier so we can focus on exactly what we want to look at. If you see a Noon Sarkin followed by a Ra Mushaddad, there is no nasal sound. You ignore the Noon. In the same way, if you see a Noon Sarkin followed by a Lam Mushaddad, there is no nasal sound. You ignore the Noon. And that is as simple as that. That is the rule of assimilation when it comes to Ra and Lam after a Noon Sarkin. You ignore the Noon. Let's look at an example where there's a Noon Sarkin followed by a Ra Mushaddad. And first of all, we look at how you will see it written in the Quran Majid. Okay, and you can see in the blue, there is a Noon Sarkin there. And then straight afterwards in the red is a Ra Mushaddad. Okay, now as soon as you see a Noon Sarkin, your mind should ring a bell to say, I've got to look at the next letter because there's going to be something that will tell me the nasal sound I've got to make. How do we read this? Well, this is how you would read it. This isn't how it would be written, but this is how you would read it. Because the rule is that if you see a Noon Sarkin and afterwards is a Ra Mushaddad, you ignore the Noon. As it's written, this is the correct way of writing it, the Noon will be there. But when you read, it's as if the Noon isn't there. So, if I demonstrate, the way to read this would be Mir Rabbihim, Mir Rabbihim. Absolutely no trace of the Noon sound whatsoever. We ignore the Noon. Let's look at this example here. You can see there is a Noon Sarkin. To make it easier, we put it into blue. Straight afterwards, there is a Ra, a Mushaddad Ra. The rule is, if you see a Noon Sarkin, you look at the next letter to decide what the nasal sound is. If it's a Ra Mushaddad, you ignore the Noon. You will read it as if the Noon isn't there. Notice that the Noon is there as it's written, but when you read it, it's as if the Noon isn't there. And if I demonstrate, the way to read this word would be فَمَرَّبُّكُمَا, فَمَرَّبُّكُمَا. Absolutely no trace of Noon because we're going to ignore the Noon. Okay, so that's Noon Sarkin followed by a Ra Mushaddad. Let's look at a Noon Sarkin followed by a Lam Mushaddad. And let's see an example of what you might see in the Quran Majid. Here you have a Noon Sarkin written in blue to draw your eye. Straight afterwards is a Lam Mushaddad. The rule is, when you read that, you ignore the Noon. So, when you read, you would read it like this. Notice, in the Quran Majid, you will see it with the Noon, but when you read it, it will be as if there is no Noon there. And if I demonstrate, it would be Allah, Allah. No trace of Noon whatsoever. The Noon is completely ignored. One more example. Here, we have the Noon Sarkin highlighted in blue. Straight afterwards is a Lam Mushaddad. The rule is, as soon as you see a Noon Sarkin, look at the next letter. If it's a Mushaddad Lam, then you ignore the Noon. When you read it, it will be as if the Noon isn't there. Look closely. The Noon is there, written, but when you read it, you don't read the Noon at all. And if I demonstrate this word, Allah, Allah wistaqamu, Allah wistaqamu. No trace of Noon whatsoever. You ignore the Noon if straight afterwards there is a la mushaddad. Okay, and that is the rule that we have for today. So when we are going to practice our reading today, and if we come across a Noon Sakin and then afterwards is a Ra Mushaddad or a La Mushaddad, we will apply that rule. Okay, so the chapter we have today, Surah Al-Alaq, is chapter number 96. It sits in part 30 of the Quran Majid. There are 20 verses, 1 ruku. It's a chapter that was revealed in Mecca, and it was the very first chapter that was revealed. There is an additional box today because in this chapter there is what is known as a prostration of tilawat, and it happens at the end of verse 20, so right at the end of the chapter. And tomorrow we will have a presentation which will tell you a little bit more about that. Okay. Oops-a-daisy. So if I can have somebody to the mic, and then we can do some recitation.
G2130, please unmute yourself.
G2130, Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, darling. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, I'm very well. Jazakumullah for asking. So did you follow that rule as I was explaining it?
Yes.
Okay, well done. That's good. Okay then, sweetheart. So if we can start with you doing Dawood and Tasmiyah, do them properly with melody.
A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim.
Okay, right then. So we are going to read first of all to the end of here, and let me just talk through the verse so that we know why we're going to read it the way we're going to read it. This letter here, a qaf with a sukoon, this is what is known as a qalqala letter. It's qalqala because it has a sukoon on the top and it is one of the qalqala letters. So when we join here, we're going to do a slight bounce. Iq, iq.
Ik.
Well done. Here we have an alif with a sukoon on top. Now this alif has a fatha beforehand, but it is not a mad alif. Why? Because it has the sukoon. This is what is known as an Alif Sarkin. Sometimes people say Hamza Sarkin. And when we read, we'll do a slight jerk. R, r.
Ra.
Well done. Okay. Sarkin Sin. A Sarkin letter always joins to the most recent Muttaharik letter. So you always work backwards. It won't join to this Alif because it is not Muttaharik. It has no stroke. But it will join to this ba. Okay, we will ignore the alif. 1 second timing. We have a mushaddad letter here, and the way we deal with mushaddad letters is we first of all ignore the stroke and we just join them with the most recent mutaharik letter, which happens to be this ra, rub, and then we'll put this stroke sound in, rabbi. Okay, well done. We have a mushaddad lam here. So the rule is join it to the most recent mutaharik letter. It will be this gaf that we're going to join it with, and we're going to ignore the alif. A yamad, that means there'll be 2 seconds here. Okay, and then when we finish, we're going to apply the rules of waqf, which on this one we haven't taught you yet, but this will go to a Sarkin qaf, and a Sarkin qaf has a qalqala sound to it, a slight bounce. So now that we've done that analysis, read with me, darling. Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq.
Ikra bismi rabbikallazi khalaq.
Okay. One more time, yeah, with this qaf. Iq.
Ik.
Well done. Iqra
Iqra.
Try and get the qaf from the very back of your mouth, darling. Yeah, try and take your tongue, raise it, just sort of block off your throat. Iqra.
Iq.
Well done. That's perfect. Iqra bismi.
Iqra bismi
Well done. Rabbikalla.
rabbikalla.
Well done. Just 1 second on that, okay? Rabbikalladhi
Rabbikallazi
khalaq.
khalaq.
Well done, okay? That qaf is almost there, okay? Make sure that you take your tongue and you try and block off the throat and you'll get the right sound out, okay?
Okay.
So one more time. Iqra bismi rabbikalladhi khalaq.
Iqra bismi rabbikallazi khalaq.
Okay, so when you practice later on, darling, yeah, make sure that here you do 1 second, okay? It's just a
Okay.
fatha for 1 second. Okay, so moving on, let's go to the end of this one. 1 second timing, 1 second timing. This here is a lam alif. The lam happens to be first. This is where the lam starts, okay? And it curls around and this is where the alif ends. This sukoon goes with the lam. Lam Sarkin joins to the most recent mutaharik letter, which is not this alif, but it is this qaf, okay? The qaf and the lam will join. Okay. The alif will then join with a noon Sarkin. And as soon as you see noon Sarkin, you know that you've got to look at the next letter because the next letter is going to decide the nasal sound. Now, for now, we haven't taught you this rule yet, so you'll just follow with me, okay? In time, inshallah, we will teach you the rule. Alif mad, because there is a fatha just beforehand. Okay. Noon Sarkin. As soon as you see noon Sarkin, you should always think, the nasal sound is going to be decided by the next letter. Now, you do know this rule. The next letter here is an ayn. Tell me something about the letter ayn. Where does it come from?
It comes from the bottom of your throat.
Ayn. It does come from the throat. Well done. Okay, but it comes from the middle of your throat. But
Okay.
the important thing is, it's a throat letter. And a throat letter tells you that this noon Sarkin is going to be a clear noon sound. Min.
Okay.
Well done. Okay, so let's read this verse. خلق الإنسان من خلق الإنسان من علق.
Khalaqal insana min alaq.
Well done. Okay, one more time. خلق
Khalaqal
الإنسان
insana.
خلق الإنسان.
Khalaqal insana.
Okay, so that was really well done, yeah, but don't rush, okay? قل
Kal in
well done. Min alaq.
min alaq.
Well done. Okay, sweetheart. Jazakallah for coming to the mic, okay? And inshallah, we'll have you again another time. Allah Hafiz for now.
Allah Hafiz.
If I could have another student to the mic, please.
G2135, please unmute yourself.
G2135, Assalamu alaikum. G2135, Assalamu alaikum. Okay, if you can have somebody else then.
G2177, please
G2177, Assalamu alaikum. G2177.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, darling. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, very well. Jazakumullah, darling, for asking. Dawood and Tasmir, darling, first, please.
Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
Well done. Okay, then. So we are going to, first of all, go to here. quickly run through the rules that are going to be applied. Qalqala sound, because this is a qalqala letter, it has the sukoon. This is a Sarkin alif, okay? So we are not going to treat it as a mud letter. We're going to do a soft jerk. Ra. Okay, this here is a lam alif. The lam starts here and the alif ends here. The sukoon goes with the alif, with the lam, and the fatha goes with the alif. So it'll be the lam that will join with this gaf. Okay. And then when we pause, we will apply a rule of work, which will mean that this meme will go to a Sarkin meme. Okay, so Iqra wa rabbukal akram.
Okay. Iqra wa rabbukal akram.
Mashallah, well done. Okay, let's move on to here. Okay, so here there is an alif. It doesn't have a stroke, and there is a rule that will allow you to work out what the stroke is. This alif carries a fatha. Okay, when we read it, it doesn't have it written here, but whenever you see an alif and a lam together like this at the beginning, the alif carries a fatha. So this will be read as an al. This is a yamad, 2-second timing. This lam sakin will join with this ba because that's the most recent mutaharik letter. And when we finish here, we're going to pause and apply the appropriate rule, which is that this meme will go to a sakin meme. Alladhi allama bil qalam.
Allazi alama bil qalam.
Okay, well done. Okay, let's do it from here. Okay, bil qalam.
Bil qalam.
Well done. So let's do it from here now. Allama.
Allama.
Well done. Don't make this lam thick, okay? It's just a normal lam. Allama bil qalam.
Allama bil qalam.
Okay, well done. And now let's read it from here. Alladhi allama bil qalam.
Allazi alama bil qalam.
Okay, so let's just get rid of this. Okay, let's just work on this one. Yeah, there's a mushaddad lam and there's an ayn with a fatha. Let's apply the basic steps that we use when we're doing mushaddad letters. Yeah, we look at the mushaddad letter and we identify which letter is going to join with. The most recent mutaharik letter before this la mushaddad is this ayn with a fatha. Okay, and the way that we've taught you is that when you have a mushaddad letter that you're going to join, ignore the stroke that's with the mushaddad letter, just make the sound. So do this, okay? Al.
Al.
Well done. And then you bring this stroke into play. Allah.
Allah.
Well done. Allama bil qalam.
Allama bil qalam.
Well done. So, alladhi allama bil qalam.
Allazi allama bil qalam.
Okay, so later when you practice, okay, make sure you do these joinings properly, okay? Allama.
Allama.
Well done. Okay, so let's just move on to here. Okay, so this lam sakin will join with this meme because those are the letters that will join. We will ignore the alif in between. There is an alif, it carries a kasra, so it will join with this noon sakin. That noon sakin will have a nasal sound which will be decided by the next letter. And for now, just follow the sign that I make. Alif mad, because there is a fatha just beforehand. Alif mad, there is a fatha just beforehand. Okay, and then when we pause here, okay, we will actually read this exactly as it's written, because when you see a Sarkin letter, it stays the same. And we've got to make sure that we try and make the Ain sound here properly. But inshallah, okay. So, Allamal.
Allamal.
Well done. Allamal insan.
Allamal insa.
Nama lam ya'lam.
Nama lam ya'lam.
Well done. Okay. This is an Ain. So you just make a nice soft sound, okay? Ya'lam.
Ya'lam.
Well done. Okay. Allama al-insana ma lam ya'lam.
Allamal insana ma lam ya'lam.
Well done. Okay. So try not to rush through this bit, okay? Ya'lam.
Ya'lam.
Okay, well done. Okay, sweetheart. Allah Hafiz for now. Inshallah, we'll listen to you again another time.
Okay, Jazakallah.
You're welcome, darling. Jazakumullah for coming to the mic. If I can have another student to the mic, please.
Can I please remind all students to use your correct GIDs? If you have your name on there, we'll have to put you in the waiting room. So please use the correct ID. G2202, will you please unmute yourself?
G2220.
2202.
2202. Assalamu alaikum. G2202. G2202. Okay, if you can move on to somebody else.
G2225, please unmute yourself.
G2225. Assalamu alaikum. G2225. Assalamu alaikum. Okay, let's move on.
G2229, please
G2,
unmute yourself.
G2229. Okay, so some of you may not, when you've joined, may not have connected to
Hello?
computer. Assalamu alaikum. Who am I speaking to?
Sorry?
Who am I speaking to? What is your ID?
G.
2229.
G2229.
Yes.
Okay. All right then. Assalamu alaikum, darling.
Salam.
Wa alaikum salam. Okay, so let's now read from here. But can you start with Dawood and Tasbih to start off with, please?
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
Okay, mashallah. Okay, sweetheart, so we're going to read from here and to here. So let's just have a quick look through the verse to see why we're going to do what we're going to do, okay? This alif has a fatha just beforehand. It's an alif mad. Normally it would be 2 seconds. There is this wiggly symbol on the top, and this wiggly symbol on the top tells us to stretch the 2 seconds for a little bit longer. And we can stretch that for up to 5 seconds if we want to. But today we'll do it for 3 seconds, okay?
Okay.
Okay, this is a Mushad Noon. A Mushad Noon always has a 2-second ghunna sound. So we're going to spend 2 seconds and make a deep nasal sound with that. Here we have a lam and an alif. The lam is here and it carries a sukoon. The alif is here and it carries a kasra. This noon mushaddad is going to join with the lam sarkin. The alif with the kasra is going to join with this noon sarkin. Noon sarkin makes a nasal sound, and the nasal sound it makes depends on the next letter. And so for today, you will just have to follow along with the sound that I make because we haven't as yet taught you this rule.
Okay.
2 second timing here because it's a mud. 1 second timing here, 1 second timing here. When we join with this da, it's a sakin da, it's a qalqala letter. It has the sukoon, so we've got to manifest that jerk sound, okay? So when we join the ya and the ta, there'll be a certain amount of bounce. We are going to pause here, and then when we pause, we apply the rules of waqf, which for this one we haven't as yet taught you, but you can follow along with me. Now, some of you will see that there's a wiggly symbol here, okay? One more time here, okay? Now, I'm not going, that symbol doesn't apply when I pause here. And inshallah, we may get around to teaching you why that is the case, okay?
Okay.
When I pause, I'm just going to do a 2-second sound here. Okay. كلا إن الإنسان ليطغى.
كلا إن الإنسان ليطغى.
There's a fatha on there, darling, yeah? لا يطغى.
ليطغى.
MashaAllah. Okay. كلا إن الإنسان ليطغى.
كلا إن الإنسان ليطغى.
Okay. So let's do it slowly. Innal. Well done. 2 seconds on the noon, okay? Innal. Well done. Insa. So from here, innal insa. Okay, don't rush through, okay, darling? Okay. Na. And then straight afterwards is a lam with the fatha, okay? So make sure you say with the fatha sound. La. La yatagha. كلا إن الإنسان ليطغى.
كلا إن الإنسان ليطغى.
Okay, so see how when you do read and practice later on, okay, get somebody to listen to you. Make sure that you do this as a fatha, okay? This is not a kasra, and every time you've read it, I've heard a kasra sound, okay? So pay quite a lot of attention to that particular letter.
Okay.
Okay, so now let's move on to the next verse here. We have a noon sarkin. As soon as we see a noon sarkin, we've got to look at the next letter because the nasal sound that this noon sarkin makes depends on the next letter. It's a ra mushaddad. This is the rule that we've just introduced today. When you see a ra mushaddad straight after a noon sarkin, what do we do to the noon sarkin? Can you remember?
We don't sound it out?
We don't. We ignore it, okay? Because this is an example of assimilation. As soon as you see a noon sarkin followed by a ra mushaddad, the noon sarkin is ignored. So what happens here is the ra mushaddad joins with this alif and the noon is ignored. And the reason is it's a rule of assimilation. Okay, so that's an example of a rule that we learned today, okay? 2-second timing. This scene is going to join with the most recent mutahharik letter, which happens to be this ha. Okay, and then when we pause here, we will read this for 2 seconds. It doesn't really change. Okay. Ar-ra'ahu istaghna.
Al-ra'ahu istaghna.
Okay, so alif and ra are joined. There's no noon sound. There's no lam sound. Ar-ra.
Ar-ra.
Well done. Ar-ra'ahu
Ar-ra'ahu
istaghna.
istaghna.
Well done. Now, ghain is not a qalqala letter, okay? So we don't do any sort of bounce. Tagh.
Tagh.
Well done. Taghna.
Taghna.
Mashallah. Okay, sweetheart. Jazakumullah for coming to the mic. Allah Hafiz for now. And what
Allah
we'll do now is we'll move on to the letters that we have today. And we have 3 letters today. And the first letter is Z. A letter that, if you read it properly, it's sounded out for 5 seconds. Z. It has 1 dot above it. It can join to the previous letter, as is the case here, but it never joins to the next letter. You can see the example here. You can see an example here. Okay, and this is at the end anyway. Z. It carries a dot above it, joins to the letter beforehand, never joins to the next letter. An important thing to notice about Z is that whenever a letter joins to it, it joins from the top. Okay, so if you notice, this meme is coming around here and it's coming around here, and then it's joining to the Z from the top, and then the letter is being formed. Okay, now that's actually quite an important thing to remember, because sometimes you will get confused that is this a Z or a Dhal. If you look at how the letter is joining into it, that will be a good clue as to what the letter is. This letter, whenever a letter joins onto it, joins into it from the top. The way we pronounce this letter is that we take the tip of the tongue and it touches the inside of the lower front teeth. The tip of the tongue touches the inner portion of the lower front teeth. Okay, that is that letter there. Moving on to the letter Sin. Again, a letter that, if it's read properly, is sounded out for 5 seconds. It carries no dots. It has these prongs to start off with. It can join to the previous letter, as you can see here, and it can join on to the next letter, okay, as you can see here. This is what it looks like when you write it on its own, but when it's joining, it's just these first bits that are used. Okay, here. The bottom bit is cut off. It's just the first bits. When it's in the middle, again, it's just those 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, the 3 prongs there that are used. If it's at the end, then you get the full shape. Now, the way to pronounce this letter is very, very similar to how you pronounce the letter Z that I've just demonstrated. There's only a little bit of difference in where the tongue touches. And when you read it, there should be a slight whistling sound, very, very slight whistling sound. Sin. Okay. Lastly, the letter Sod. Again, Sod. A letter that, if you read it properly, as it's meant to be read, it's 5 seconds, and there's a slight bounce at the end. Sod. It carries no dot. As you can see, it can join to the previous letter, and it can join to the next letter. This here is how it looks when it's written by itself. But when we join, we just take the first bit here, okay? The first bit. Again, in the middle, it's just the first bit of it. The bottom bit is cut off. If it's at the end of a word, you'll see it written in its complete form. Now, the way to pronounce this letter is very similar to how we pronounce the letter Sin that I've just described. But there's an important difference, and that is that the tongue is raised to the top of the mouth to make the sound thick and heavy. Sod. And if you practice these 3 sounds, you'll notice how similar they are when you move your tongue, but they become quite different when you move your tongue according to the rules that are written in these blue circles. And for your homework later on, you have to practice these letters, but in particular, this particular letter. And remember to raise the tongue to the roof of the mouth, because then it will make the sound thicker and heavier. And that's the way that you distinguish a sod from a sin. Okay, those are the 3 letters. We'll go back to our text, and if I can have a student to the mic, please.
Yes, G2233, please unmute yourself.
G2233, Assalamu alaikum. G2223.
33.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam, darling. How are you?
I'm fine. You?
Alhamdulillah, very well. Jazakallah for asking. Dawood and Tasmiyah to start off with, please, darling.
A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim.
MashaAllah. Okay, then, darling. So let's see what is going on in this verse here, okay? Noon mushaddad, a 2-second gunna sound. We're going to spend 2 seconds on this and make a deep nasal sound. 2-second timing here. There is a ra mushaddad. It's going to join with the most recent mutaharrik letter, and if we work backwards, we find that it's this gaf that it will join with. Okay, this is a jim with a sukoon, so this is a qalqala letter. We will do a slight bounce on here when we read it. When we pause, we will apply an appropriate rule of waqf, and when we read, we will read this for 2 seconds, which is essentially how it's written. Okay, darling. So, inna ila rabbika ruj'a.
Inna
Carry on.
Inna ila rabbika ruj'a.
Okay, well done. Okay, so let's just work on the end here. Okay, we got to do a bouncing sound on the jim. Yeah, ruj.
Ruj'a.
Well done. Ruj'a.
Ruj'a.
Mashallah, well done. So let's now bring the gap. Karuj'a.
Ruj'a.
Well done. Okay, let's do it from here. Rabbika ruj'a.
Rabbika ruj'a.
Okay, so don't rush these two, okay? Rabbika ruj'a.
Rabbika ruj'a.
Okay, so when you practice here, the kaf and the ra are going to join, but there are 2 ra's there. That's what the tashdid is telling you, okay? Karuj.
Karuj.
Well done, okay? So when you read it later on, okay, make sure you spend the appropriate amount of time. Don't rush through it, okay? Okay, let's go back to here. This noon carries a fatha, just 1 second. The 2 seconds is going to be spent on the n sound, okay, for the noon. But then when we do the na, it's just for 1 second, okay? Inna.
Inna ila.
Rabbi. Karuj'a.
Karuj'a.
Well done. Okay. Next verse up to here. Okay. 1 second timing, 1 second timing. This is a ya with a sukoon, ya sarkin, and it has a fatha beforehand. So this is not a ya mud. Okay. It's a different type of ya, and inshallah we'll teach you about that soon enough. Okay. So follow with me when I make this sound. This lam mushaddad will join with this ta because it's the most recent mutaharrik letter. we will ignore the alif that's in between. Okay, this is a ya mad because there's a kasra just beforehand. So there'll be 2 seconds there. Now, here we have a noon sakin. As soon as you see noon sakin, the nasal sound that it's going to make depends on the next letter. And you do know this rule. Tell me, this letter here, what do you know about this letter here? Anything?
That it's not a throat letter. I mean, it is a throat letter.
It is, yes. It's a ha. It comes from the bottom of the throat and it's a throat letter. And so that means that when we read this noon, we read it with a clear noon sound. Yan ha.
Yanha.
Well done. So if we read from here, أرأيت الذي ينهى.
أرأيت الذي ينهى.
MashaAllah, well done. Okay, let's move on to here. This is a ba sakin. Ba is one of those qalqala letters. It has a sukoon, so we are going to manifest. We're going to make us the sound of the qalqala, okay? So we're going to do a little bit of bouncing here. Ab.
Ab.
Well done. Okay. This is a tanween. Fatatain. As soon as you see a tanween, you know that the sound that the nasal sound that that's going to make depends on the next letter. The letter that it's going to depend on is actually here, the alif with the kasra, okay, the mutaharik letter that's coming up. Tell me, what do you know about the letter alif? Is it a throat letter?
Yes.
It is indeed. So this tanween here will be made with a clear noon sound. Done.
Done.
Well done, okay? And it's going to be said that way because it's followed by the alif. Okay, alif mad, because it has a fatha, 2 second timing. And then this lam is a mushaddad lam, so we will join it with the sad, and then we will end the verse, and we will read it for 2 seconds because of this vertical fatha. Okay, so repeat with me, darling. Abadan idha salla.
Abadan iza salla.
Well done, well done. Now this is a letter that we covered today. So, round your mouth, raise your tongue. Solla.
Salla.
Well done. Now this lam is not a thick lam, okay? So don't make it thick. La.
La.
Well done. Solla.
Salla.
MashaAllah. Okay, darling. Jazakumullah for coming to the mic. Allah Hafiz for now.
Allah Hafiz.
If I may have another student to the mic.
G2235.
G2235. Assalamu alaikum. G2235. Okay, if we can have somebody else.
2238.
G2238. Assalamu alaikum. G2238. Okay, if we can move on.
G2135.
Assalamualaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. Who am I speaking to, darling?
G2238.
Okay, well done. Okay, sweetheart. So let's move on to the next verse. Okay, but whilst I get my highlighter done, can you do the Dawood and the Tasmiyah, please?
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
Okay, well done. So let's look at the next verse here. Okay, starting from here. The alif carries a fatha, 1 second timing. 1 second timing. Okay, this here is not a ya mad. It will make a different sound because it doesn't have a kasra. There's a fatha just beforehand. Okay, so we will teach this soon enough. Okay, but just follow with me the sound that I make here. Noon sakin. As soon as you see a noon sakin, you have to look at the next letter. The next letter is gaf. you don't know this rule just yet, so just follow with me when I make the sound. Okay, 1 second timing, 1 second timing. Lam Sarkin will join with this lam with the fatha. We will ignore the other sounds in between. The Sarkin lam will join with this lam because it's the most recent mutaharik letter. 1 second timing. Then we will pause here and we will apply an appropriate rule of waqf, which means that we'll basically read a 2 second stroke here. Some of you will see that there is this wiggly symbol here, but that wiggly symbol, okay, for want of a better word, this one here, this doesn't apply when we pause, okay? It only applies when we read on, but that's a rule for another day. Okay, so repeat with me, darling. Ara'ayta
أرأيت
in kana
إن كان
in kana.
إن كان
Okay, so try to smile when you do the ga, because it's a thin sound, okay? Kana
كان
ala al-huda.
على الهدى
Well done. Ara'ayta in kana ala al-huda.
أرأيت إن كان على الهدى.
Mashallah. Okay. So, moving on. Okay, so this is a waw sarkin, okay, but it's not a waw mud because there happens to be a fatha just beforehand. So just follow with me with the sounds at the moment. A 1 second, 1 second, 1 second timing. This mushad ta is going to join with the most recent mutaharik letter, which happens to be this ba, okay? Qaf with a sukoon. It's a qalqala letter. It carries a sukoon, so we will definitely make the qalqala sound, okay? So there'll be a slight bounce. When we pause here, we will read this for 2 seconds. Okay, so أو أمر بالتقوى.
أو أمر بالتقوى.
Mashallah, mashallah. Okay, sweetheart. So from here, أرأيت إن كان على الهدى.
أرأيت إن كان على الهدى.
أو أمر بالتقوى.
أو أمر بالتقوى.
Mashallah, mashallah. Really nice timings on everything. Just be careful that when you come to the end, it's only for 2 seconds, okay? No longer. Just 2 seconds here as well. Okay, sweetheart. Jazakumullah for coming to the mic. Allah Hafiz for now.
Allah Hafiz.
Okay, so we're coming to the end of the class, and what I will do is I will just recite to where we got to there. Yeah, okay, I will recite the surah up to there and then assign the homework. If you can follow as I read and then observe the rules as I apply them. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق. خلق الإنسان من علق. اقرأ وربك الأكرم. الذي علم بالقلم. علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم. كلا إن الإنسان ليطغى أن رآه استغنى. إن إلى ربك ربك الرجعى أرأيت الذي ينهى عبدا إذا صلى أرأيت إن كان على الهدى أو أمر بالتقوى. And inshallah tomorrow we will complete this chapter. The homework for today is, in terms of your Quran, is practice Surah Al-Alaq, and we were aiming for verse 10, but we have reached to the end of verse 13. Okay, so I will adjust that before I post that to the parents WhatsApp group. So try and read to the end of verse 13 and practice, apply all the rules. Apply all the rules that you know, not just the ones that we've taught so far. There is a prostration of tilawat at the end of verse 20 of this chapter, and we will inshallah go through that tomorrow with you. Today's rule was just one of the rules of Noon, Sarkin and Tanween, and we looked at assimilation, a word that is English. The equivalent is idgham, the Arabic. The rule is that if you see a ra mushaddad after a Noon Sarkin, you ignore the Noon. You see a lam mushaddad after a Noon Sarkin, you ignore the Noon. 3 letters, za, sin, sod, and we would like you to practice those sounds, in particular the sod. Okay, make sure you try and make that thick and heavy. Okay, so we have overrun slightly with our class today. So I will lead the dua. If everybody could please follow with me at home. Allahumma arhamni bil-Qur'an al-Azim. Oh Allah, have mercy on me through the Quran.
Muted.
The great. Jazakumullah for sharing your time with us. I hope and pray that you've learned something today. For now, until we meet again, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.